Double Game Week 34 is finally here, probably the most pivotal part of the season so far, and in this video I am going to discuss the best Double Game Week players to buy for our FPL team. So as always, make sure you do drop a like on the channel, aim for 200, and of course make sure you do smash the subscribe button. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. Okay, so first up, a quick look back at Game Week 33 because it was an eventful one to say the least. Ended up scoring 69 points and made a very spontaneous transfer of Pedro Porro to Rico Lewis. I always had penciled in 8 Nori, but there was huge doubts about him starting. No real idea on how long he was going to be out. And when we had the Man City team news about Rico Lewis starting, I decided to take a punt on it. It's worth noting I was on a stag do last weekend, so I wasn't really engaged with FPL. When I saw that news, I thought it was too good of an opportunity to miss out on. And well, it ended up being a terrible choice. Rico Lewis with the 2-pointer, Man City getting their usual goal conceded from Ross Barkley of all people. So 69 points sounds great, but unfortunately the majority of the points came from highly owned players. Cole Palmer with that 26-pointer and Erling Haaland with that 10-pointer, but of course captained. The only real differential points proved to be Dubravka with the 6-pointer, which was actually a little bit lucky because I started Areola, who of course didn't play, so he auto-subbed in. And I also had Solanke's 7-pointer, which was no luck about that. I was really happy to have Solanke and quite surprised at his ownership around my rank. Really disappointed to see the double Arsenal clean sheet disappear. Obviously the midfielders in Salah, Son and Saka were woeful, and Darwin Núñez continues to be quite possibly the worst FPL asset I have ever owned across the course of this season. So look, 69 points, a red arrow from 32k I believe to 38,000. No dramas, it could have been a lot worse, but looking at my team with 2 free transfers going into Game Week 34, I feel like it's an opportunity to get myself back into the top 30k. So let's go through some of the fixtures and of course the players that we need to buy. Okay, so a quick reminder for anybody that didn't know about the double Game Week 34. Now it's worth noting I have removed some of the teams from this list just because they have awful fixtures and we're never going to consider them for our teams. Now with my team, I'm already trebled up on Arsenal, so I personally am not looking to invest in an Arsenal asset, but I definitely think going triple Arsenal, if you're not already, is a great move. You can see here Crystal Palace top of the ticker with 2 home games against West Ham and Newcastle, and they really are talk of the town right now, offering a bit of defensive coverage in Henderson or Munoz, midfield options in Eze and Olise, and of course Mateta up front as a cheap alternative. So some great options for Crystal Palace, which we will touch on, and I do think that is going to be a priority transfer for a lot of FPL managers. In terms of Sheffield United, Diaz is actually a consideration at 5 million, a brilliant differential midfielder who has decent underlying numbers. But of course, can you really go there when you have Crystal Palace and Liverpool midfielders to choose from? I think the answer is no, but if you're free hitting, I do think Diaz is a consideration for your teams 100%. In terms of Arsenal, I'm already trebled up, but if you're looking for a differential, I think Havertz is the way to go for sure. Playing almost as a line breaking forward in the previous game, I expect him to come back in as a number 9 in what I would say is 2 favourable games away against Wolves and of course at home against Chelsea. In terms of Everton, I would only go Pickford in this situation, but with the injury to Braithwaite, we don't really know the severity. That could actually diminish the potential of Everton clean sheets, but you're only really doing it for that Nottingham Forest game. Wolves, Cunha bouncing back with that brace, I think is a great option, but can you trust the minutes? That's the big thing. Outside of Cunha, I don't really think any Wolves options are a consideration apart from 8 Nori, but he is currently yellow flagged with no updates from Gary O'Neill. Bournemouth, personally, I'm doubled up on Solanke and Zabanya. I wouldn't be going anywhere else, and I wouldn't be buying new with those tricky away games. And of course, Liverpool. This is the big one. I think I think Fulham is a tricky game away from home, and of course, the Merseyside derby. I would expect them to comfortably beat Everton. I think Liverpool is the way to go from a treble perspective. We're going to discuss the way that I'm going to go with my team, but I think Alisson is a consideration. I think Trent Alexander-Arnold is a brilliant option now that Bradley is injured, and also the midfielders in Diaz, McAllister, and of course the returning Diogo Jota. So lots of choices at Liverpool, lots of different directions you can go, and I am very envious of those that of course free hitted. In terms of the blank, this is the big thing we need to consider. If you own Spurs players and you're wildcarding in 35, it's time to sell them. Get rid of them as your cash cows, knowing that you're bringing back in a wildcard 35. So for me, already troubled up on Arsenal, my priorities now are getting a third Liverpool player and an investment in a Crystal Palace attacker. And one thing I really do think we need to consider when we are looking at the fixtures is, of course, the involvement in European football. Now, as I mentioned, I think Liverpool are really important to triple up in, but I'm just going to put the fixtures up right now. We need to remind ourselves, they play tomorrow night away against Atlanta. We have no idea what kind of approach Klopp is going to go for, but I'd be really surprised if he does just completely play the B team. I do think there will be some investment there in premium first team players. So we need to remember they play Thursday, then they play Sunday away against Fulham, then they play Wednesday away against Everton, and then they play away against West Ham on the Saturday, followed by the Spurs game, which is actually in the foreseeable future. So that period of games is not ideal. Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday, Saturday. I think there is going to be rotation, and any player that you do choose is at risk. So just be cautious if you are investing in a Liverpool player for this double game week. I would pay close attention to those that are playing in the Atlanta game, because if they're benched, I think their starting chances against Fulham actually increases, and then it's anyone's guess who is going to play against Everton. And the same is also going to apply for Arsenal. As I mentioned, I've already invested in my triple Arsenal, but I would, if you're looking to bring in a third or maybe even a second option, actually really pay attention to this Bayern Munich game, because they too have lots of fixtures coming up. They play tonight against Bayern. They then have Wolves on the Saturday away. Then they have Chelsea on the Tuesday, and then they have the huge game away against Spurs on the Sunday. So they're Wednesday, Saturday, Tuesday, Sunday. That really isn't ideal for Arsenal. And with a squad that is quite thin in comparison to other teams, I would be really careful about investing in Arsenal once again. I think the only ones that we could probably say are quite guaranteed will be Saka, Saliba, Gabriel, maybe even Havertz at this time, and Odegaard. Outside of that, I would not have a clue who would start week in, week out. So the Crystal Palace midfield is the place that I really want to invest my money first and foremost. When we're looking at a double game week, I really want to be having a few things ticked off. Do they offer goal threat? Do they offer guaranteed minutes? And do they offer set piece potential? I think Liverpool right now are in a position where, outside of Salah and already have Darwin, I literally have no idea who is going to start in that front three. Whereas with Crystal Palace, I can almost say with certainty that Eze and Olise are going to get pretty decent minutes in this double game week, in particular Eze. So first and foremost, before we deep dive into the underlying numbers, looking at the fixtures and the spacing of them, I do think Eze will get more minutes than Olise, just because Olise has returned from an injury. Eze has been playing for a little bit longer, and I do think he is more match fit than that of Olise. The only other concern about Crystal Palace is it is under a new management, and he hasn't really had Olise and Eze at his disposal week in, week out. We saw them start together alongside Mateta in the previous game. Hopefully that is a sign of things to come, but with the likes of Jordan Ayew waiting on the bench, I wouldn't be surprised if we were to see maybe Mateta, Eze, Olise against West Ham, and then maybe Mateta, Eze and Ayew in the second game. So just be cautious. There's no player that is guaranteed to play every minute in this double, but if I was to put one as a bit more guarantee, it would be Eze. Now, looking at the underlying numbers, it is Olise which really is the interesting one. In terms of actual goals per 90, he almost has double that of Eze, which is really interesting. But the XG is actually a bit more close. Olise at 0.38 per 90 and Eze at 0.34. However, of course, we are taking into account penalties for Olise, so that does slightly skew the XG for him. It is a little bit less when we're looking at non-pen XG. In terms of shots, very, very similar between the two. Shots on target, again, very similar. The one that has actually been really interesting when we're taking a look at it is the expected assists, Olise being considerably above Eze at 0.43 to the 0.22, and also big chances created, also in Olise's favour. Whenever I was looking at the two, I always associated Eze being the goal scorer and Olise being the chance creator. But if Olise is not only winning in the chance creation department, but also in the goal scoring department, it does start to question whether he is just the out and out best option for us managers. The problem is, can we guarantee those minutes? I think if I was free hitting this week, I would go for both, lock both of them in. But if I'm looking for a first transfer in my team as my sole investment in the Crystal Palace attack, I think I have to go for Eze. Just because of the guaranteed game time, the set piece responsibility, potentially on penalties, and I think his numbers are still pretty solid. So Eze is the man for me. However, if Olise is getting hyped up in press conferences, I could be tempted by him, and he would be guaranteed in a free hit team if I was building one. But Eze is the man for me right now. So outside of Crystal Palace, Liverpool is the other team that I'm really looking to invest in, and I think a lot of people are too. I don't think a lot of managers are already tripled up in Liverpool, just because there's been so many injuries to quite highly owned FPL options. So it's great to see some of these names return to double game week 34. Now, it's worth saying, before I actually talk about these names, we need to caveat this by saying Liverpool play tomorrow against Atlanta. This is a real big factor, because if we were to see maybe Jota not play a single minute but be on the bench, we would then put the assumption that he's going to start in the first game of the double and maybe get decent minutes in the second. So do remember, we need to monitor the game in which players play considerable minutes against Atlanta. So just going through the list here, because I think these are the most interesting names in terms of double game week 34. Alisson is actually now an option. I was looking at a potential way of getting into the Liverpool defence, and Alisson is now actually a viable pick. Returned in game week 33, I think his minutes are guaranteed. Keller has been fantastic, but I just see no reason why Klopp is going to rotate goalkeepers. Alisson is one of the best in the world, and I think if you've already got maybe double Arsenal and another defender like Aït-Nouri, and you also can't really get to a midfielder, Alisson is a decent investment. Now, do I see them keeping a clean sheet in both Fulham away and Everton away? No. But I do think one clean sheet is definitely a potential against an Everton team who just cannot score goals. And Liverpool are still in this title race. So for me, Alisson is actually a brilliant investment, and the only place to go if you want guaranteed minutes in that Liverpool defence. But of course, Liverpool themselves have been a little bit ropey defensively. So all you're really getting with Alisson is clean sheet potential. Whereas the other two that I've named, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Robertson, do offer that little bit of cover from an attacking perspective. Now, Trent has only just returned in game week 33. He got about 25-30 minutes off the bench. The big boost about it is Connor Bradley is officially out for a few weeks, which should see him not get any game time in game week 34, which is great for those in particular that are wildcarding in 35 and only need Trent for this double game week. That said, I still have no guarantees whether he will play both games. They have Joe Gomez, who could easily play at right back, but I'm expecting Trent to definitely start at least one of those games and play maybe 30 minimum in the other. And with someone like Trent, who has such a high ceiling, this could be the differential pick that a lot of managers have been looking for in their FPL team. So do not rule out Trent. Robertson is the other one, probably the safer pick, I would argue, but same again, Shimikas could easily come into this team. He's played 90 minutes in the last 2 league games. He is definitely more match fit than that of Trent Alexander-Arnold. And I think these two are going to be quite important to monitor their game time against Atlanta. For me, if you have the money available, I'd probably just go Trent and really go for that upside pick, hoping he has one of those incredible games where he gets maybe a goal from a set piece and a couple of assists. Now, in terms of the midfielders, this is the other department. Mo Salah isn't on the list just because he is Mo Salah and pretty much everybody owns him going into double game week 34. Very, very difficult to pinpoint which one is the best pick here. Jota played 30 minutes in game week 33, came back from injury, but have I got any guarantees of his minutes? I have zero. I literally do not know how many minutes he could play. If I had to guess, I think he probably plays 20 in one and maybe gets 60 in the other. So he is probably the one that gets the least minutes out of the 3 on this list. But I also think he's the most clinical of the bunch. So he is probably the most highest risk, highest reward player. In terms of Diaz, he has to be the safest pick. Started the last 13 league games, but that was without Jota as an option in this Liverpool team. I do think Diaz could be an early substitute. I would probably say he starts both, but comes off earlier in these games. But his underlying numbers are very, very good. But I'm a little less confident on his minutes just because of the return of Diogo Jota. I'd almost be more inclined just to punt on Jota as opposed to Diaz going into this week. Last at McAllister, his underlying numbers are by far and away the worst of all of these picks. However, if you want guaranteed minutes in this team, and maybe even the responsibility of penalties if Mo Salah's off the field, then McAllister is the way to go. But sometimes if you're chasing rank, you want to have a bit more of an excitement in your team. McAllister just feels like a very, very dull pick. So to conclude, McAllister if you want guaranteed minutes. Otherwise, I think if Jota only plays a little bit of minutes against Atlanta, I'll be very tempted by Diogo Jota. And in terms of the defence, I would go Trent over Robertson. And if you don't want to go to the defence, I think Alisson is a really nice option for your FPL teams. Okay, so taking a look at the Gameweek 34 team without any transfers made, I have 2 free transfers available. And this team could go in so many different directions. So it looks a little bit false, this team, because I've got someone like Zabanije starting who has terrible fixtures, and I also have Cole Palmer away against Arsenal. But to be honest with you, Chelsea always step up in these big games. Cole Palmer seems to step up with these penalties. So even though I'm expecting Palmer to be on the bench, I have no actual problems with starting him if I need to. And the other concern with this team is Garnacho. I was actually hoping for him to be a single game week player, but he went off at halftime with a little bit of a dispute against Ten Hag, and I think there is a little bit of an internal issue going on there. So I have no guarantees that Garnacho is actually going to play considerable minutes, which is a big old problem. So team looks like this. 2 free transfers. I am almost certain Son to Eze will happen. I prefer doing Son to Eze rather than Haaland to Mateta, for example, because Haaland actually has a fixture. So Son to Eze is pretty much locked in. The second free transfer could go any direction. I could either do Areola to Alisson and get myself a Liverpool coverage and just start Zabanije. I could keep my goalkeeper and end up selling someone like Rico Lewis to Trent Alexander-Arnold, which sounds really exciting. Or I sell somebody like a Garnacho and I bring in another midfielder from Liverpool, whether that be Jota, Diaz or McAllister. The problem is I have no guarantees on these Liverpool picks. So from a safe perspective, it would be Areola to Alisson and it would be Son to Eze. That is where I'm currently sitting with. And it would end up being a pretty decent team, but a few single game weekers in the side. Or if I wanted to go a bit more exciting, I probably would play 4 defenders and then I would sell Lewis to Trent, get rid of the goalkeeper transfer and end up doing Son to Eze and basically playing a 4-3-3 formation. So lots to think about right now. I am more compelled to go down that route, but I will be doing a Friday team selection video where I have a bit more clarity off the back of that Europa League. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. A -4 isn't off the cards either, where I could do Trent into the defence, I could do the Eze move, and then I could also go for a punt in another department, maybe a Diaz at Sheffield United, but right now I am leaning towards Son to Eze and Dubravka or Areola to Alisson. Yes guys, okay, that's going to wrap up today's Game Week 34 transfer plans video. Really hope it's provided some value. As always, make sure you drop a like and smash the subscribe button. Tomorrow I'll be doing my free hit draft and Friday will be my team selection with also confirmation on my actual moves and of course an update on what my plans are going to be for Game Week 35, 36 and beyond. So make sure you stick around for that and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Cheers.